There is a painting on a cave wall in Spain that is at least 8,000 years old. A human figure drawn in red ochre is hanging off the side of a cliff. Around them, a swarm of bees. Below them, a very long drop. And they are not falling, they are climbing toward the bees on purpose. We spent a century calling our ancestors primitive. But primitive people do not climb cliffs into bee swarms. They do it for a reason. And the reason changes what you think you know about the human brain. That painting is called the Cueva de la Araña, the Cave of the Spider. It was discovered in 1924 near Valencia, and for decades researchers filed it away as a curiosity. But the more scientists looked at it, the stranger it became, because the same image kept showing up. Rock art depicting humans harvesting wild honey has been found in Spain, India, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Australia. Different continents, different cultures, thousands of years apart. The same scene painted over and over again. A human, a cliff, a hive, and the climb. That kind of repetition does not happen by accident. When the same behavior shows up independently across every corner of the world where humans lived and bees existed, it means something. It means the behavior was not regional or cultural. It was human to Hun. And to understand why, you have to go back much further than 8,000 years. You have to go back roughly 10 million years. In 2014, a biologist at UC Santa Barbara named Alyssa Crittenden published research that would reframe everything scientists thought they knew about the human diet. She had spent years studying the Hadza, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer groups on Earth, living in Tanzania in a way that researchers believe closely mirrors the lifestyle of our earliest ancestors. And she found something that did not fit the standard story. Honey was not a treat for the Hadza. It was not a seasonal bonus or an occasional indulgence. It was the single most calorie-dense food source in their entire diet. On days when honey was available, it could account for up to 15% of their total caloric intake. Men rated it as the most important food they consumed. More important than meat. More important than tubers. More important than anything else they could find, and they would do almost anything to get it. Think about what that means for a moment. These were skilled hunters. People who could track animals for hours across difficult terrain, read landscape the way we read text, and bring down prey with tools they made by hand. And they still ranked honey above the hunt. That is not a preference. That is a priority. And it has been a priority for a very long time. Here is why. Wild honey is approximately 80% sugar. When a human body that has been running on roots, lean meat, and seasonal fruit suddenly receives a concentrated dose of glucose and fructose, something happens in the brain that goes beyond nutrition. The reward circuitry fires in a way that is almost identical to what happens with certain addictive substances. Dopamine floods in. The brain registers not just satisfaction, but urgency. A signal that says, find this again, remember where it was, do whatever it takes to get back to it. This is not a modern malfunction. This is a very old system doing exactly what it was designed to do. In 2021, researchers studying primate feeding behavior proposed what they called the honey hypothesis. The argument was straightforward. For millions of years before any human hand ever held a tool, our primate ancestors were drawn to fermented and sugar-rich foods in the wild, overripe fruit, fermenting berries, and honey. The animals that pursued those foods most aggressively got more calories. They had more energy. They reproduced more successfully. Over millions of years, the ones who wanted sweetness the most passed that drive on to their descendants. By the time modern humans appeared, the compulsion was already ancient, already coded in, already non-negotiable. But here is where it gets genuinely interesting. Getting wild honey is not easy. Bees do not build their hives on the ground. They build them in cliff faces, in hollow trees high above the canopy, in cracks in rock walls 20 meters up. They are also, as you might expect, not cooperative about being robbed. A single disturbed hive can contain anywhere from 10,000 to 80,000 bees, each one capable of stinging multiple times. An unprotected person walking into that situation is not making a rational calculation. They are responding to something that overrides rational calculation entirely. And ancient humans knew the risks. We know this because of how sophisticated their methods were. The Hadza, do not simply climb toward hives and hope for the best. They use smoke. Specifically, they burn particular combinations of plant material that produce a dense, slow smoke that temporarily subdues the bees, slowing their response time and reducing the number of stings. This knowledge is not written down anywhere. It is passed from person to person, generation to generation, refined over thousands of years of painful experimentation. Someone, at some point far back in human history, worked out that fire could make the bees slower, that certain plants work better than others, that the angle of approach mattered, that timing mattered. That is not primitive behavior. That is applied chemistry. That is iterative problem solving across generations. That is science running on a platform of obsession. Researchers have also documented that in some regions, early humans developed an unexpected partnership to make honey hunting more reliable. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, a small bird called the greater honeyguide has evolved a behavior that has no parallel anywhere else in the animal kingdom. It actively seeks out human beings with a specific chattering sound, and then it leads them, stop by stop, directly to wild beehives, waiting at each perch until the human follows. In exchange, it gets the wax and the larvae left behind after the humans take the honey. This relationship is old, deeply old. Genetic analysis of the honeyguide's behavior suggests it predates any known human culture. The bird did not create the behavior in humans. It found the behavior already there and built a strategy around it. Honey was not just food for early humans, it was medicine. Archaeological evidence from Neolithic sites across Europe and the Middle East shows honey stored in ceramic vessels alongside other medicinal materials. Ancient Egyptian medical texts list honey as an ingredient in hundreds of remedies used to treat wounds, infections, and digestive illness, and this was not superstition. Raw honey contains hydrogen peroxide produced naturally through an enzyme bees add during the curing process. It has measurable antibacterial properties. The ancients did not know the mechanism, but they observed the outcome. Wounds treated with honey healed faster. People who consumed it regularly got sick less often. They were not wrong. They just did not have the vocabulary to explain why they were right. And then there was the social dimension. Among the Hadza, honey is not hoarded. When a man finds a hive and harvests it, the honey is shared. It goes back to camp. It gets distributed. Everyone eats. This pattern shows up in virtually every hunter-gatherer group ever studied. Honey is a communal resource. The person who climbs the cliff does not do it only for themselves. They do it for everyone, something that earns status, trust, belonging. The cliff is not just a cliff. It is an audition. Here is what we actually lost when we domesticated bees and put honey in plastic bottles on supermarket shelves. We lost the ritual, the danger, the shared moment of return. We did not lose the craving. That is still there, operating exactly as it always has, driving billions of people toward the sweetest option on every menu, in every restaurant, on every continent. We just removed everything that used to give the craving a shape worth living inside. Today, the average person consumes roughly 17 teaspoons of added sugar every single day. The ancient humans who climbed cliffs for honey might have tasted concentrated sweetness a handful of times in an entire year. And yet the drive that sent them up those cliff faces, that drive is the same one you felt the last time you reached for something you probably did not need. We did not inherit their world, but we inherited their brain. And somewhere in Valencia, Spain, on a cave wall that has outlasted every civilization that came after it, someone thought that climb was important enough to paint, not the hunt, not the kill, not the tools or the fire or the shelter, the honey. 8,000 years later, we are still talking about it. Some things do not need to make sense. They just need to be worth the climb.